Germany now says it will, for the first time, send heavy anti-aircraft weapon systems to Ukraine to help fight off Russia's invasion. The decision follows weeks of criticism at home and from Ukraine. Defense Minister Christina Lambrecht made the announcement at a US-led meeting of defense and military leaders at Ramstein Air Base here in Germany.
The US Air Base in Ramstein, Germany. This is where the United States and its allies pledged new packages of ever heavier weapons for Ukraine during a meeting on Tuesday that was hosted by US Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin.
We don't have any time to waste. The briefings today laid out clearly why the coming weeks will be so crucial for Ukraine. So we've got to move at the speed of war. And I know that all the leaders leave today more resolved than ever to support Ukraine in its fight against Russian aggression.
The day kicked off with a surprise. In a notable policy shift, Germany, which had been criticized for refusing to send heavy weapons to Ukraine, announced it would now send Gepard anti-aircraft systems. We've made the decision that it's now important to support anti-aircraft defense. That can be done with a Gepard, and it's exactly what's on the list of what Ukraine needs. And that is what we, coordinated with others, are now making possible. We'll continue doing this. Not everyone in Berlin welcomed the decision. I find it problematic. Germany doesn't even have enough military equipment for itself in the case of Putin totally losing control.
I think it's important. I also think that what the German government is doing is good. But I am also not sure if offering weapons is actually going to stop the war.
I didn't like the degree of hesitancy. In the end, I would actually be for aggressive weapons, so heavier machinery. In his closing remarks, Austin said the gathering between the US and its allies will not be the last. Once a month, they'll meet to discuss Ukraine's defense needs to help them fight the Russian invasion.
Let's get more from DW's chief political editor, Michaela Kufner. Welcome, Michaela. So what is behind this German U-turn? What's prompted it?
An internal struggle within the governing coalition, which lasted for weeks and in the end saw Chancellor Scholz and his Social Democrats still not wanting to deliver those heavy weapons to Ukraine, while the Free Democrats and the Greens had already been calling for exactly that. At the same time, they all said that they're on the same page, but they clearly weren't. And here we now see what is a second small turnaround, really, because internally here in Germany, this is seen as a paradigm shift, the delivery of heavy weapons into a war zone. That is a first, and it crosses what previously was seen as a red line here in Germany. Externally, particularly when you look at those Eastern partners, it's Germany finally being in sync with the rest of Western allies.
Right, so what pushed them over the edge?
It really was the internal pressure as well, that the Free Democrats, the Greens, wanted to see their Chancellor strike not just a different tone, but actually show that with action. And at the same time, we're seeing this external pressure. The Americans calling this meeting on German soil at a US military base. If you wanted to be part of the West, really, this was the moment to change direction here.
And as we heard in the report, this meeting is to become a regular event.
Yes, and I think there is a very profound message in this. We've had a lot of debates in the past over who is the West. Well, it was the West sitting down around the table.
And
right
not just
there.
NATO.
That's the important thing. It was exactly not NATO countries. It's a much broader set of countries. It is the West, it's liberal democracies standing together, standing up for Ukraine. NATO still wants to and vows to stay out of this, being clearly just a defensive union. And here, these are the willing states, the states willing to stand up for Ukraine, but making this monthly just manifests the impression we're getting increasingly. This will last not just months, but potentially years.
Right, and how damaging has Chancellor Scholz's perceived foot-dragging been for Germany's standing?
Well, he started off pretty fast. 3 days after Ukraine was invaded by Russia, it was the German Chancellor who declared a Zeitenwende, a new era. And then he was not just perceived to be dragging his heels, he was not willing to go down that avenue of heavy weapons. Now Germany is seen to do exactly what it vowed not to do once again in this mounting conflict, and it does raise some question marks over who really leads in Europe, who is the true leader. And at the same time, it has actually done quite a bit of damage to the trust that eastern states, those eastern countries, the Baltics, have in the Germans.
OK, thank you for that. DW's Chief Political Editor, Michaela Kufner. Let's talk about this further with Walter Feitinger, who is a former Brigadier General of Austria's forces. He's now president of the Centre for Strategic Analysis. That's a Vienna-based think tank. Welcome to DW. Let's talk about the weapons that Germany is now promising. What sort of difference will these Gepard anti-aircraft tanks make?
I do not expect an immediate effect on the ground, on the battleground, by delivering heavy weapons from Germany, but in the longer run, and when I say longer run, I think about a few months, for example, it can have a strong impact on the capacities of the Ukrainian armed forces, because the danger from the air coming from Russian fighters and attack helicopters is very intensive. So having some weapons against that will make a change.
And the clamour from Ukraine for air defences from NATO countries, that seems to have calmed down now. Does that mean they've given up on that because NATO has said no to it?
Yeah, it is still in place, I would say, and it is of highest importance for the survival of the tank forces, for example, from the Ukrainian side, because the danger from the air is so high. So they need it really very importantly.
And so how well equipped, let's talk about the Ukrainian side then. How well equipped is Ukraine's army 2 months into this war?
I think it's a question that nobody can answer really exactly. But what we see is the effect on the ground. The Ukrainian forces are still able to stop Russian assaults, and they are still able to maneuver in a certain extent in a certain area. So they are withstanding on a very high level, I would say. And that is in a huge advantage of the delivered weapons I see already, because they got a lot of anti-tank weapons and anti-air weapons. And that makes a difference, because now they are able to defend on a higher level, and they are not running out of weapons and ammunition.
So this is a battle that seems to have exposed Russia as something of a phantom superpower, as it were, because the expectation was that they would obliterate Ukraine. And clearly, we presume that there are many more Russian forces in reserve. So what's going on here? Is Russia choosing not to throw everything at this conflict, or is Russia actually doing that and still coming out not as well as we expect?
As many analysts say, Russia is throwing a lot of troops that they have available towards Ukraine. So it is not the size, I would say, it is more the capacity on the ground to act, and to act in a very coordinated way. So many people say already that the force and the strength of the Russian forces was overestimated, and I agree to a certain extent.
In his meeting with the UN Secretary-General today, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said he had complained about the West effectively trying to establish an alternative organisation to the UN. Now we hear that the United States is convening a monthly meeting of defence and military leaders from 40-odd countries to coordinate weapons supplies and strategy. Mr. Lavrov seems to have a point, doesn't he?
I would say it is a change of argumentation from the Russian side, because from the very first moment they neglected to call it a war, they call it a military operation. Then they say they will focus on the Donbass only, and they attacked Kiev, the capital, and so on and so forth. So I would say it is a very adaptive argumentation from the Russian side according to the situation on the ground.
OK, good talking to you. That's very clear. Thank you so much for joining us. Walter Feichtinger.
Thank you.